Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got Nick returning. We got Sunday Matt returning. We had the new face, Catherine, here. Very stoked to have you on. Now, while I am excited, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. For the rest of the year, that is. Then we're going to be changing things up as everybody gets used to it. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will engage them directly, kind of like this one. Solid Jinx, afternoon all, Winterstorm, Chris, everybody. Good to see you, buddy. And Daniel jumps in. Bockham. Awesome. Bockham to you, buddy. Yeah. No worries on that. So let's get some intros in, though, before we go too far. Start with Matt, and we'll work our way down. 10 to 15 seconds. Who are
10
you?
to 15. I can spend like 5 seconds talking nothing, and then 10 seconds intro. My name's Matthew, ex-Army engineer with the Canadian Armed Forces, turned health coach, turned chef, and now still going to school, get into the service, more in service industry. That's pretty much it.
Bam. I like it. Catherine, how about yourself? 10 to 15 seconds.
Yeah, I'm Catherine. I have been a tactical strength coach now for the past 10 years. Had the lovely opportunity to work with every single branch in the military and find myself now down working with veterans in active duty at the University of Health and Performance in Arkansas. Thanks for having me, guys.
Bam. Brevity. Love it. Nick, how about yourself?
Yeah, that was good. Nick Ige, former Army Ranger, now currently a neuroscience student at Harvard, advocating for the destigmatization of non-standard forms of therapy.
Fantastic. And he is at Harvard, everybody. Yeah. Now, very excited to get into this conversation. And the reason I'm excited is actually mindfulness as a topic. This was the first podcast that Shaun and I did together back almost 2 years ago. And it turned into a really great conversation. I really enjoyed it. He seemed to like it. And then we slowly poked him and prodded him to get to a point where he got in front of a microphone as well. So I'm excited to get into this. But what is mindfulness? First off, mindfulness, this is the definition I pulled up. So mindfulness means maintaining a moment by moment awareness of your thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and surrounding environment through a gentle, nurturing lens. Mindfulness also involves acceptance, meaning that we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings without judging them, without believing, for instance, that there's a right or wrong way to think or feel in a given moment. When we practice mindfulness, our thoughts tune into what we're sensing in the present moment rather than rehashing the past or imagining the future. So, with that, when I say mindfulness, what are you guys' first thoughts, Nick? I'm putting you on the fire first.
Yeah,
What are you thinking?
I think presence, and not only like whenever I think about mindfulness and presence, it always takes me back to like moments of joy, and that's when I try and like single out these little moments and like build like a little trail, like cookie crumb trail of moments of mindfulness I can always reflect on and find like these little snippets of joy when I was like the most happy. Granted, that's just my own personal thing, and you know, it's the whole spectrum, but I always try and keep it centered around little moments of joy and being present in these moments.
Absolutely. Matt, what are you thinking?
For me, mindfulness is kind of, it focuses on the awareness part of that description, is where you're aware of where you are in the moment, the present, but also what's going on in your body too as well. Having the ability to deallocate yourself from the situation too as well, and focus on yourself or what's going on around you or how you're reacting to it to be more in the moment.
I like it. Catherine, what are your first thoughts?
Yeah, we really tapped on the, awareness and presence portion of that. I think that the word empathy comes in a little bit there, not feeling sympathetic or dwelling in a moment, but accepting exactly how you feel, where you're at in that moment. Because if we're not aware of where we're standing or what's under us or where that foundation is, then it's really hard to plan out how to move forward or where we're going. So giving yourself that grace within that moment to accept and just be okay with where we are in the moment, and kind of honing in on that and tapping into it, as uncomfortable as it might be.
I like that. Shaun, what are your first thoughts?
Well, usually I play off of the guests and whatever they bring to bear in the opening sentences. That's generally how I try to hang out there and play around with all of the thoughts. But I'm not going to do that today because a random thought popped into my head, and it's because of the coffee that I'm drinking right now. It's world-class coffee. I roasted it just before we went on our trip to Asia, and then I bagged it and froze it, knowing that I'd be coming back from the vacation mega jonesing for some Kraken coffee, which I didn't get when I was over there. Had some diabolically bad coffees over there. So like my context was adjusted on how much I was looking forward to my coffee. So I took a sip of this about, I don't know, 90 seconds ago. And when I was sipping it, before I sipped it, I smelled it. And so I was already in the moment. I was already appreciating the moment as I drank it, all of the things, all of the appreciation, all of the present with it. But 90 seconds, 120 seconds ago, I was enjoying it then, but I'm still enjoying it now because this coffee has a long follow through. Like I'm already tasting different things right now than I tasted when I first sipped it. And so the mindfulness of the moment in that present time is still carrying through to this present time. And so I think mindfulness can be, in the moment, in the zone, experiencing all of the things, feeling all of the feels, and having the presence of thought to appreciate what's going on in the now, but also the follow-on action of being present enough to appreciate what happened in that present moment just a little bit ago. So that reflection piece is adding contextuality to how to get mindfulness, or how powerful mindfulness can be, as long as you hang out in your mindfulness long enough. So not just little blips and blobs of 1 second here, 1 second there, but really being in the zone for a couple of minutes or so, you can start to thread things together and extend your mindfulness so that your life is a bit richer, I suppose. So that's the first thing that popped into my head.
Interesting. I like that. Nick, I'm coming back to you. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I'd agree. When he was talking, it made me kind of laugh, and I got like introspective in the idea of that's something I struggled with specifically this last semester at college, which I think is kind of comical, right? I spent so much time in the military, and this whole idea of like being disciplined and all the stuff, and then everything I do with non-standard therapies, and I do journaling, I do my meditations and all this stuff daily. And yet I found that this semester, specifically for college, I found it very hard to be in the moment and like let these moments kind of do their thing and have that follow through of these moments. And because of that, it felt like I was almost juggling water or trying to catch handfuls of sand. So it was just kind of funny as Shaun was kind of talking about being there in that moment. I had a little flashback scene of all these moments throughout my semester. I was like, damn, I could have been doing better. I could have been practicing more mindfulness, which I think is comical because I do daily, but then like I could have been more mindful about my mindfulness, and that would have prolonged or helped out my semester a little bit.
That leads into an interesting point. Catherine, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the word mindfulness always comes with this like soft feel to it, where like I know if I were working with a bunch of Marines or something, and I was like, hey, we're going to take a moment to be mindful, they'd be like, okay, yeah, go kick rocks. So when I'm thinking of like a mindfulness, I think of usually like, okay, shifting the verbiage sometimes, knowing your audience is to like, all right, we're going to be intentional today. What is the intent of today's training or what we're getting after? And that kind of can center around so many different areas as to like, maybe we're focusing on the self, whether that's like diving further into values or anything like that, or the foundations of where we're going. But taking a moment to kind of pause, notice what's going on. And then with that though, I think the biggest piece of that is the choice that you make after that. So you pause, you notice, and then that choice as to like, how do I move forward, or what am I doing with what I'm actually noticing? I think that it's easy to be mindful or intentional, but the action following behind that is usually the scary part. We might be noticing some things that are not so comfortable, or we're not super stoked about, or maybe it's the opposite. And we're like, oh, I love this. This gets me jazzed up. But what's your next step? What's the action on that? What's the behavior that you're going to choose and move forward with that follows with that? And that to me is usually the hardest part, and it's easiest to avoid, which is why people tend to avoid being mindful or intentional to begin with. And so, yeah, that's kind of where my mind goes with all this that we're throwing around.
I like it. Matt, thoughts on that?
No, I agree with that. That kind of reminds me of that Jocko story that he was talking about, where he was like a young lieutenant, and everyone was like down scopes and stuff, and like watching their arcs and stuff. And he was the one who actually like put things down, look left, look right. He's like, all right, this is what we're doing, and just walk forward. It was that removing yourself from that and then opening yourself up to everything around you, being present in the complete moment, not just your little arcs of fire.
Absolutely. Shaun, come back to you.
Yeah, I think that the term mindfulness has been not distorted, but has just been more commonly accepted now as just a singular moment, the now, as it were, which is ironic because then if the focus is only on the now, but there's no processing after the now or no context after the now, then the now is just nows that you never get to play with or never get to build off of or never get to manipulate or use as a tool or as a scalpel or a lever to start doing better in life. And so, we've got our past. I'm not going to frame out what the past, the present, and the future is. We talk about it on a pretty regular basis, and so that isn't required. But I think that in order to use the now moment more richly, we have to contextualize it against the past and the future to some degree. And how to contextualize it against the future, well, that kind of goes back to how I was trying to describe the coffee moment, where the now moment follows us into the future as long as we're present with that now moment and we stay not focused, but we stay present with it for a long enough period of time that we get context over a short period of time. Now, how short? Well, that's up to you. Like, how long do you want to be present with the now of the past, the mindfulness of the moment back then? If you want to make it a day-long effort, you can do that, but that's a bit of a heavy lift if you've never done it before. So my thoughts go immediately to how to play with the now, how to play with the mindfulness. And I mean, turn into a game. So it's not the suck. So it's not the homework. Like, you got to gamify the game, as I say, on a pretty regular basis. So how to take mindfulness and start to use it better? Well, I think that you've got to kind of play with it a little bit, and you've got to extend it a little bit so that maybe it's only 5 seconds, maybe only 10 seconds, but play with the mindfulness of the moment and take it into the future with you for just a short period of time and see how that feels. Start building off it. Then you can maybe by the end of the year, your mindfulness ability is to take it forward into the future with you for a minute. Well, guess what? That's a minute that you were never doing before. Bam. Now you're like a super freak. Now you've got like a whole new superpower. You're a better person for it by simply playing with something that is easy to play with, but ironically only takes mindfulness to play with mindfulness to drag it into the future with you to get context.
I'm going to go around again because these are great points and I want to get everybody's opinion on it. Catherine, I'm going to start with you though this time. What are you thinking on that?
Yeah, I mean, Shaun touched on some awesome stuff, and what really pops into my mind is, we use this phrase pretty often with the veterans and active duty that come through UHP is, we don't learn from experience, we learn upon reflecting on these experiences. And I think so often we just put our heads down and go through life because it's easier that way. It's easier just to be that workhorse and to grind through. And it's usually when we pick our heads up that it's like, holy cow, a lot has gone on. I haven't processed any of this. I don't know what to do with it. And a lot of times that's when they put their head back down and keep charging through. And we see these behavioral patterns start to kick in because it's the easier route. It's not fun to sit in your own head for a while. Hence why when you're in a waiting room, like nobody is sitting there looking, at the walls and just absorbing life. They're down in their phone or they're putting their face into something to distract them. Because being in your own headspace or just in the silence of a moment or being able to reflect sometimes is uncomfortable. But again, that's where I think growth occurs. That's where, we start to learn about ourselves and our society and our culture around us and maybe what we're pouring into or what we're lacking in so many areas. And so it's not fun, but it's an opportunity for some really beautiful things to happen if we allow it.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that one. Nick, thoughts on this?
Yeah, the phrase that kept coming to my head was the term like tactical pause. I always say I'm a push a button, get a banana type of guy. I'm a pretty simple dude, so I got to always try and like ground it in the things that I know. And to kind of what everybody was saying before, it's the gamifying the game, to taking that moment in the phrasing. Is I was thinking about ways that I've like talked to myself before on how to stay present in the moment and where I can correlate to things that I've done that are baked into kind of not who I am, but baked into the habits that I have. And it always came back to the idea of like, take a tactical pause, take a knee, conduct SEALs, right? For us in the American Army, I don't know if it's different for anybody else, but stop, look, listen, and smell, right? And the idea is after every major thing that happens, after like an infill or whatever you do, before you move on to your next course of action, it's like, take that tactical pause, conduct SEALs, get your bearings, formulate your plan, and then execute. And then when you're, in a tactical situation or doing what you do, like, well, yeah, obviously that makes sense. But then once we get removed from that environment, or at least for myself, when I was removed from that environment, I noticed that I'm always like head to the grindstone. Like I'm moving so fast, or I'm trying to move so fast that it feels like I can't get traction on anything. Where the idea is like, oh yeah, wait, let me just take a knee, do a tactical, quote unquote, tactical pause, conduct SEALs of what's going on in my life right now. Let's formulate a plan and let's execute the next step. And it's in those moments I'm able to make these noticeable gains or progressions in what I'm doing. And it's just funny how the further away I get from the military or from my old career, it's these old things kind of keep creeping back up and showing up in my life. I'm like, hey man, take these lessons that you learned. There's a reason you did it all. Take these lessons and apply them to what you're doing now, and hopefully things get better.
Absolutely. Matt, thoughts on this?
I'm really liking what Nick was saying about his stop, look, listen, and smell. And then that kind of goes into something I was thinking earlier, where it's like the hard skills, soft skills that we have. And we don't necessarily, a lot of us have a lot of soft skills, and we don't even know we have them. Like they're just those little tiny micro things that was like, hey, you know what? Take a knee. Yeah, let's sort it out, and then we can carry on. Or, you take that step back, you look left, look right. Okay, that's what's going on. We move forward, right? And those are skills that not even just military, but like people in general, we develop, we've learned from experience. When you cross a road, you look left, you look right. Every time you go into shopping mart, or every time you have a stressful situation, or every time you need to be in the future moment, go cross the road, take a look, take a left, look right. Which side of the matrix you want to be part of, as Shaun would bring up, and then just go from there. I really like how this conversation is going with the different skills of managing and also how processing the usefulness of mindfulness.
Absolutely. Shaun, any final points on this before we I got a couple comments and just want to
sure. I think that for some reason I'm tying back to what Catherine had said on how when she's perhaps addressing a group of Marines as an example, and it could be Marines, it could be Army, probably those two groups are actually great examples, because maybe they just don't want to be there listening to words like mindfulness. And so that would have been challenging for me back in the day for sure, because I'd been like, oh, here we go with a namaste. And so that just wouldn't have worked for me back then, but it works for me now because I'm wiser to how to do life better, I suppose. But back then that wouldn't have worked for me. And so then it becomes the broader subject of how best to propose these kind of ideas to a general demographic, where they don't like put their back up and think, screw you, I ain't listening to anything you've got to say. Is trying to make it available for the masses where it doesn't feel like it sucks. And so back in the day, I would have thought this sucks, but now I understand it doesn't. So I think what I would have done perhaps is, if I had a bunch of army in front of me and I was the victim up front who is about to try to deliver some wisdom, I would have thought along the lines of how best to challenge this crew that they would vibe with. So what I would have asked them to do is, okay, everyone, close your eyes. Now, try to project all around you and see how many men you can count right now, or how many people you can count in your mind right now. Project out and try to see if you can feel whether I've got one arm up or two arms up. Project out sensorially and try to understand your battle space right now. What can you feel with your eyes closed, and not trying to listen to how many people are around you, or not trying to smell who's downwind or upwind. Just try to project out with your sense of awareness and connect to what is around you. Because I've done it in the past I've done it with my own children when they were young boys, 7, 8 years old kind of thing. Used to take them out into the space behind our house, walk down an old deer trail and say, okay, boys, head up the trail, hide. I'm going to come and find you. But before you see or hear or smell me, what I want you to try and do is feel me as I walk down the trail. See if you can extend I called it the force, because that vibed with them at that point. Extend your force and try to feel using the force where I am as I move towards you. Try to identify me before you see or hear me. And they would do it. We would do it together. And it was a good, I'll call it a drill to start building that sixth sense. Now, if anyone doesn't believe that sixth sense is a thing, well, it just probably means that you haven't practiced it enough, because there is a thing called a sixth sense in my world, because I've experienced it too many times, as have a boatload of my friends. And so in order to develop a new skill, it's a practice thing, just as I did with my own children. And just as it would be with a bunch of army sitting in front of me with their eyes closed, I would have tried to talk them through a skill set build, or at least implant in their minds that if you do enough homework, you're now working on your sixth sense, which is actually what we're talking about. It is being in the now, being in the moment, feeling all the things around you through a sixth sense, being aware in the now and being present, and kind of building on a skill that I think that most military would appreciate if it was put across to them in the right way. So that's my thought.
I can't wait to see the room full of Army Marines and all these people when you're all like, we're going to use the Force. Let's do this. I think there'd be half of them would be like, yes. And there'd be half of them would be like, really? I got a couple, we're going to carry on this with this line of thought as well. But I just want to hit on these comments. Daniel jumped in here and said, being able to objectively listen to our internal processes without trying to analyze it too much, into too much depth, which is an interesting thought. Steve jumps in here as well, said, should see a room full of at-risk teenagers when I say the word mindfulness for the first couple of weeks. That's a tough room. And after a couple of weeks, though, you can palpably feel the shift. And this is interesting because I was talking about it at Jiu-Jitsu earlier today, was the fact that we have to actively engage in all of the processes at once, rather than trying to focus on any one thing or multiple things at once. It's similar to like a barbershop quartet, right? Every one of them is a great singer in their range, but when they combine, they create a harmony, which is a note that you can't reach without having all of the other notes in it. So I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on some first steps for somebody who's never even engaged in, this is the first time they've heard the word mindfulness, or they've kind of sloughed it off for years. What are some first steps that they could take to start feeling it, start putting the barbershop quartet together? Matt, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Sure. Actually, I want to bring this from the biohacking side of the house and nutrition side. But when you're eating, right, you know how everyone eats and they got their fork and their spoon, they're just like, shovel, fork in hand, yeah, ready for the next bite. When you're eating, take that utensil you have and actually put it down, right? So your hands free. And then take that moment to actually enjoy that food. Start with that as a gateway into being mindful what's going on, right? Take a look at your plate. How is it laid out? How is it designed? Unless it's like macaroni, because that's always like one big blob. But how is it individually taste with the different ingredients? What if you mix it with this, mix it with that, right? And then slowly taste it. I'm not saying like do the 22 chews a second, whatever it is, but I'm saying take your thing, put it down, enjoy it, start again, go slow. And then once you start taking that as slow, or taking that action to stop and pause, that then can translate into other things in your life, right? You're going down the highway, someone just blows by you, gives you the finger. Stop, pause, think, realize you don't have to chase the guy to give him a finger back, and just keep on going your way to, wherever you're going. It's a start, it's a process that it's a learned skill. It's not something that everyone can just jump in like, boom, I'm mindful today, right? The force is strong with this one, but it is something that you have to actually develop and grow, and it starts at very small and it can go very big.
Absolutely. Nick, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I just want to take back to what Shaun was talking about real quick with the Sixth Sense stuff. I think it's funny when you got a room full of Marines, room full of Army dudes, what have you, and you start talking about Sixth Sense, and everybody's like, I don't know about all this namaste crap, all this woo-woo stuff. But we all, a lot of us have experienced it, dude, where we're driving, it's like, oh, yeah, John can sense IEDs in the road, dude. And then, like, you're like, oh, yeah, if John says stop the vehicles, we're going to stop the vehicle. Or we all know that one salty guy we'll be walking through a compound about to do a thing, and he's like, "Oh, dude, this guy he's tuned, man. He knows what's up. He can tell when an ambush is about to happen, or when something crazy is about to go down." And in those contexts, everybody's like, "Yeah, dude, I'm down on the woo-woo." Like, that's when they believe in the namaste. But then you extrapolate that into your everyday life. You're like, "I don't know about this yoga stuff, dude. Seems kind of suspect here." And it's like 6 months ago, dude, you're talking about a dude can sense IEDs in the road, and now you're saying he's crazy because he says like meditate. So I think it's like a lot of us need to like take the time to like recognize these parallels and see that it's these little things carry over into everyday life from what we experience doing our old jobs.
Absolutely.
But to practicing mindfulness for me, I would say journaling. That's been the big one for me, and for me, or why I always recommend to my buds, is that it allows you to kind of like reflect back on the day and then be mindful in that moment. Because like it's something I struggle with personally, is being mindful and having that intention throughout the day of saying like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Because like I've done the thing where I set my daily intentions, and then as soon as I close my journal, forget that I even wrote those down, and then just start sending it live throughout the whole day. Right. But like when I reflect later on that night, when I journal again, then I'm like, okay, these are these moments that I need to like pay attention to. And then it allows me to be mindful in that moment and really collect about what's been going on through the day and be present.
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love the question as to like, where do we start or how do we even introduce this? And an area that I like to kind of touch on a lot with this subject is, you know, not referring to like, hey, what's the matter with me or what's the matter with you or your scenario, but switching the wording around as to what matters to you. And I think when you start to focus on that, it brings you back to the small things in life that matter, the small controllables, and your value system. Creating that foundation and getting back to your values, I think allows you, like, decisions don't become very hard anymore, because if you are living through those values, you're understanding them thoroughly and starting to apply them, like your decisions are always going to follow off of that. And it's not really going to lead you in a bad direction, because again, it sits with your foundation in your space. But taking the time to focus on that and really hone in, like, I think people think they know what their values are, or they should themselves over a lot of areas. Like, I should be doing this and this should be my values. But when you really take that step and like, okay, what truly matters in your life? How do we break this down? How do we make this very, very simple? Start to apply those or start to live through those. What does that look like? What are the habits or behavior changes that I need to make? What's the style of communication I now need to approach? What are the relationships in my life need to look like? How do I surround myself around the things that matter? And then when we start to trickle that into, like, where does this bleed into your everyday life? How do we push forward this, not only like within your own home space, but into your workspace, into the, your friends and family around you, and start to live through that. I think then it really keeps you centered, it keeps you grounded. But again, it allows you that opportunity to really focus on just the small controllables, and it sheds a new light on so many different things. And again, it's a little bit of that different approaches to, like, how do I, focus on these small things or be mindful in the moment. But it's like, no, what matters to you, and like, own that, own it and live it. And that alone is such a huge step for so many people to try to make. And it can be overwhelming too, because people are like, holy cow, like, I thought these things mattered, but they don't, or they're finding other things that they want to prioritize and live through. And again, I think that's just a really beautiful ripple effect to get the ball rolling in so many different areas and be able to expand on that, and just create, again, that lifestyle, that culture change that people are kind of seeking when looking to start that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
I do, but first I got to take a quick photo. And the reason for that is because Catherine had said a number of times how to focus, how best to focus on this subject, how best to focus on what we're about to do, how best to focus on what we're doing. And so, hilariously, 2 years ago, the first time I went on a podcast with Chance, and that was the subject of mindfulness. And when he said to me, hey, would you mind talking about mindfulness? I looked around behind me. I was like, is there someone standing behind me that's going to talk about mindfulness? Because it ain't me, because I didn't think I was the guy who could talk about it. So what did I do when he said, hey, could you talk about it? I cracked the books, because I have my own thoughts on mindfulness, but I wanted to get contextuality against, well, what does mindfulness mean to everyone? All the people that I don't know, or some people that I do know. And so I started doing my homework. I started figuring out mindfulness while I was being mindful. And so we had a conversation on a podcast, and apparently it was pretty good. And then during that podcast, what I'd said was one tool, because you'd asked, what are tools, Chance? One tool that you can use to get mindful in the moment is the tool that we all carry around on the regular. And so my challenge to everyone out there is, how do you take your photos? How do you take photos? Do you just like snap them off without much thought? Because that's not the way I run my program. Because I've been doing photography for over 30 years and I kind of like it. It's not that I'm good at it, but I take it kind of serious in the moment. So, come bouncing off the 7 weeks in Asia we just came back from, I took a boatload of photos, and every single photo, even if it only took me 10 seconds to take, or it took me a day to take, it doesn't matter how long it took. Every single photo that I took had intention. I was trying to capture the moment as I wanted to capture it through the lens that was in front of me. And it wasn't just trying to capture the perfect tilt of a building roof. It was trying to absorb the entire bandwidth of the moment into a single moment on my phone. And so, as I'd said to Chance in the podcast 2 years ago, I use a camera to be mindful in the moment, because what it makes me do is be present in that moment as I'm about to take the photo. It's one thing to look at a bee on a flower and probably not be present with it as you're thinking about you got to wash the dishes that night. It's an entirely different thing to see a bee on a flower and be present with the bee, because that's the thing that you're trying to capture. And so it's our job with a phone or with a camera to capture that present moment in the present time, rather than give it a half-assed quick click and then move on to the next task that you're already bubbling up in your head before you even took the photo. And so a camera is a great way to be present in the moment, but you've got to understand what is happening with that camera. You've got to understand that it is a real-time capturing device. It's not a distraction as you work on your homework for tonight. It's being present with the moment as you capture the moment, and then maybe even look at the photo and think, context, whatever your context is beyond that next few seconds. But it's a process that, if you engage it properly, taking a photo or using your camera differently in the near future will start shifting your sense of mindfulness.
I love that. Catherine, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it just makes me picture, I don't know if you've seen The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, but when Ben Stiller finally climbs the mountain and they see the snow leopard and they don't take a picture. They've just spent like this entire journey getting halfway across the world. And it's like, sometimes moments are just too beautiful to capture because you respect it so much. And I think that, I don't know, every time I watch that movie, that it just hits me, and it makes me reflect a little bit on moments like that are those aha moments in my own life, and areas like, okay, yeah, maybe we need to slow down. There are areas that we can appreciate, that we can love and pour into, and that's the beauty of these wonderful relationships that we have with human beings all around us every day. We feel the impact of somebody, even if it's like at the grocery store, right? And they are present, they have a great conversation with you, or they say 2 words and you're like, oof, like that felt good. Like that person was present with me. They meant something, or maybe you meant something to them. And it just feels good. There's so much science behind it, but like everybody has felt that moment. They know those people that are present and that are there. And yeah, it's beautiful when we can tap into that. But yeah, it sometimes knocks us off our feet a little bit of like, yeah, you know what? I've been grinding through life, or I've been pushing through all these things, or letting life kind of go by in a blur. And it's been a while since I've had that moment. So I love that you bring that up and really, really hone in on focusing on that.
Absolutely. Nick, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was thinking about what Catherine was just kind of saying here at the end, is like moving through life and looking for those moments. It's like, for me personally, I find the most calmness and stillness or mindfulness when I'm like either surfing or snowboarding or climbing. It's like, as you can see, I like to surf a lot. It's kind of this big thing for me. It's whenever I have the conversation about mindfulness, and with me being in college now, all this stuff is kind of cyclic, and it kind of comes up quite often. And I always ask the question, like, when's the last time you remember like pure joy, where like just being in that moment and being like, damn, this is dope, dude. And for me, one of those recent moments was a couple summers ago. I was in North Carolina in the Wilmington area, doing some work down there. And I met these guys at this CrossFit gym, super cool dudes. They invited me to come surfing with them. And over the summer that I was in North Carolina, I got to make a crew of surfing friends. And one day we were out there at sunset. We finished work. We finished the gym. We all went to catch like a sunset session. And it was just beautiful Carolina skies, cotton candy, pinks, blues, the whole thing. The water looked like saran wrap, and it was these beautiful waves. And we were just had this little spot to ourselves. We were catching tons of waves. This group of us were all just like chee-hooing and hollering and having a great time. And like, I just remember I was paddling back out and just like resting my arms on my board, just kind of letting the current take me out, as another one of the dudes caught a wave and the whole squad was just cheering him on, screaming. And I remember taking this breath and being like, I don't want this moment to end. You know, and that was like the first time in a couple of years that I distinctly remember feeling extremely present for everything that's happening, and this like overwhelming amount of joy. And, you know, it's those moments that I try and find again. And to me, what like truly being present is being able to have that moment where you can just appreciate everything that's going on at that time.
I love that. I saw Catherine as you were describing those guys look up like, oh, I remember those. It was perfect. So you're able to bring a moment to others as well by being present in that moment. I absolutely love that. Matt, thoughts on this?
No, I like that. Yeah, I've seen Catherine do that too. It's like, yeah. No, I like that. That almost kind of goes in a little bit of a flow state too, as well, when you're kind of like so in the zone and you're just like flowing with things, and you just don't want it to end because it's such a good feeling. Like I totally hear what you're saying, Nick. It's interesting that those two things can actually intertwine very closely, is being mindfulness in the moment and then letting the flow state take you to where that moment needs to be.
Absolutely. Shaun, coming back to you. What are you thinking?
Well, just a few days ago on the podcast, we were talking about the flow state, and you only mentioned it briefly. It wasn't like it was an entire podcast. I mean, you'd need several podcasts to talk about flow state and do it justice.
It will be soon. Don't worry.
Roger that. So flow state is an entirely different and fascinating subject, but to Matt's point and in line with what Nick just said, the more that you can enter into a flow state, the more you are mindful to some degree. But the mindfulness sometimes gets stripped out of it because you're so flow that things just unfold in front of you. It's all very natural, and time sort of disappears, even though time is just a construct. And so, you know, you're in the present and you're enjoying the what? I call it the vibe. It's the vibe of things. So as Nick was explaining that scenario, like I was vibing on his vibe, because I know that in that moment there was definitely a vibe. And it was either with the brohemos, or it was with the waves, or it was with the cotton candy. It was all of the things, perhaps, that were required for Nick at that moment to vibe in a way that it snapped into his mind's eye forever. And so those moments, sometimes it requires a lot. It requires a lot of different confluences to kind of come together and be distilled into such a magnificent vibe that, bam, you get it. And once you feel it, it's hard to forget it. But I think that that's maybe some of the challenges that maybe veterans face to some degree. Is it takes sometimes a lot to come together for the vibe to be the right vibe where, bam, it smokes them right between the eyes, and then they can never forget it. And so getting that vibe, I think, is critical for someone to start entering into this sense of mindfulness or feeling the vibe more frequently. Because, you know, for some veterans, they've been devoid of the vibe for so long that it takes more vibe than it would have back in the day. And so these moments are things that you should seek. So, you know, I painted a picture of a bee on a flower. Well, that might not be enough for some folks out there where they feel the vibe. So maybe it needs something bigger. And that's why there's events that you can attend, like Operation Pegasus Jump comes to mind, where a bunch of veterans get together once a year and jump out of perfectly good airplanes, and they're all leaning against the wall and being bohemos, and like the vibe is the vibe, and the vibe is enough to like get guys into the game of, oh, I'm starting to feel things again because of the magnificence of the moment, because of all of the things that are confluencing together to like make a mark. So I think it requires, you got to make a mark in your mind to be able to get context on, oh, that's the vibe. I kind of forgot the vibe. Then once you start building on vibe, then eventually with time and maybe a camera or whatever tools you want to use, you can start paring it down until the simple things, the moments that are in front of our noses every single day, every single second, you can then vibe with that. But I don't think it's a case of, you get off the couch one day and then the next day you're freaking David Goggins. It just doesn't work like that. And so it's a case of, you want to be more present, you want to be more mindful. Well, you can't roll off the couch and then by tomorrow be like Mr. or Mrs. Mindful. We're not going to see you in the Wikipedia page with your photo. It takes time. And so perhaps it's a large event that you need to consider getting together with the troops or whatever the case is, where there's enough stuff going on that you feel present in the moment, you feel things in the now, and then you can start building off of that.
That is a fantastic point, and I could not agree more with that. I remember last year I started taking. I was taking those moments. I was being challenged by my psychologist to take those moments, and I remember at times taking them, enjoying that moment, and going, this needs to be shared. And so I would take a quick video of like a bumblebee rolling around on a leaf, or a little creek, and putting a microphone right beside it and just listening to that for like 30, 45 seconds and posting those things. Because I think, to your point, Shaun, especially from the military side of that vibe was given to us, right? And it was just you show up at the regiment, you're hanging out with the boys, you're doing your things, you're out in the field, you're like, it's just being given to you without any real sought afterness. Like, I wasn't feeling it in the moment because I wasn't actively aware that it was happening until you leave it. And then you're like, oh man, I miss the boys, and I miss the times, and I miss the things, and I miss the stuff. But it's the vibe that you're missing. It's not so much, I mean, yes, obviously the people and the things, but it's that vibe. And not until it's reintroduced into your life that you go, oh, we can actually use it. Oh, we can create it ourselves. Oh, and it's all of those dawning moments that you can then click into and say, right. To the point now that, for instance, like I showed you guys that photo at the beginning there of the hills and me on a horse and all that stuff. That was one of those moments that I was able to take and really soak it all in and look at the sky and look at the cattle and smell the grass and do all those things. But I would not have been able to do it a year before that. I would not have been able to find that moment. And so, like you guys are saying, and everybody's saying this, is that it is skill. It is 100% a built skill. Any other thoughts on that? I got a couple comments here I want to touch on, but anybody else got any thoughts? Nick, what do you got?
I liked what Shaun was saying. He said being able to feel again. The vibe is being able to feel again. I think that's an important thing. Like, I think most dudes or most people don't realize that they're going numb, and how important it is to like be, what we're talking about, mindful in the moment that you are going numb. You know what I mean? And it's like, I remember when I first transitioned out of the military, I talked a lot about it. And that's because I didn't realize at the time, kind of what Shaun was saying, is like that vibe was something that I was missing. And I haven't done it, and at the time of my life, I hadn't done anything where I could experience that vibe again. I'd gone numb, and I didn't realize it, and didn't have anything else that made me feel like I did beforehand. And obviously now I'm doing what I do, climbing mountains and all this other jazz. And through collecting these experiences and trying to be present in these other moments and doing these other things, am I finding that like, okay, now I have other vibes. I have other things that were so powerful enough, so accumulating, that I'm able to be like, okay, this is something in my life that I think had more of a vibe than what I did in the military. And then it gives me other experiences to draw upon and other things to talk about now, and allowed me to kind of like start feeling again. Like when I was climbing Denali, we're at like 19,000 feet. We summit, I start crying the tears freeze in my face and I can't breathe. And I'm just like, all right, over this, right? But that moment was so powerful that like it kind of overshadowed a lot of the other things I did in the military. And that's what I think the power of like being able to feel again is. Like a lot of dudes would get out, start moving on in life, go numb, don't even realize it, and then don't pursue anything else that makes them feel that alive again. And then it's just this autopilot thing until they punch out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's working with both past and present within the military world. I think there's we use the word vibe here, but there's an identity loss or crisis with that. And within this population, I think so many people lose their identity because once their uniform is taken off, they're like, I don't know how to continue serving because they've been in such a servicing role this whole time. They take that uniform off and they think that they've lost themselves with that. And it feels very selfish within this community to pour into yourself or do anything for yourself. And so these moments where you can develop and you can grow and you can notice all these things and just like become whole again or like fill your cup, people avoid it because they're like, no, like I'm here to give back. And I raise my right hand and this is where I'm going with things. And they forget like, no, you matter as well. And so I think that there can easily be that loss of identity or that vibe, and they're searching for it in so many different areas. And so, yeah, finding back or honing in on those areas of like, what were you once passionate about? Even having conversations of like, who was your childhood hero? Like, what did you feel when you saw Rocky for the first time, or like when you watched the American Gladiators? Like, what did those people do for you? It's like you got that excitement. What has that changed? And for a lot of people, it hasn't. Those simple characteristics or joys in life haven't really changed. They might look a little different, but it's like, let's tap back into that. Like, what makes you smirk or tick or smile, whatever that is. But again, it's one of those areas that like, I think with this military community, they're like, nope, it's not about me. We got to go. It's like, no, you matter. So let's tap into that. And it's hard, it's scary, and it's easy to press forward with it. But, it's finding those little passions and those pursuits. And that always comes back to that mindfulness, which always correlates with your identity and being able to, continue your service. And it just might look a little bit different.
Absolutely. Matt, thoughts on this?
No, I agree wholeheartedly with both of them. I can't say much more. I mean, that's the reason why I'm in the kitchen is because there's a vibe that gets developed too with you and a good crew, and you're out there crushing out plates after plates after plates, and you're in such a good vibe with each other, and it's what it is. And it is something that's, you do have to get that passion from where you had it before and reignite it and refocus it and be in the moment with it and just run with it. And that's again, what Catherine was saying, a lot of people forget that leaving the service. They are so fixed on that identity of what they were and not what they could be.
Absolutely. Shaun, come back to you. What are you thinking?
Yeah, the could be part is probably the part that is often missed. The focus is usually on what I am right now rather than what I could be. And so that's critical, I think, to the conversation of mindfulness, understanding that we're supposed to be present in the now. But if you've served your country in some regard, or you've served your fellow man and you miss that, well, your responsibility in the now is to understand what you can do for the team in the future by being more present now, and by being a perfect illustration of how all of this works, by being present with yourself, and by being curious and passionate about the immediate future, and engaging in something that gets that vibe back, that gets you stoked, that gets you in the game. Well, now you're encouraging everyone around you on the team who is also trying to solve this puzzle. You're encouraging them to step into a curious and passionate trajectory that will take them forward into something that is going to stoke me, is going to stoke the brohemo to my left and right, so that we all collectively see, man, Matt is a freaking chef. What the heck, bro? How'd that even happen? How'd you do that? I'm curious. So now if he explains a couple of pro tips to me and I'm like, yeah, I'm down with that. Let's do it. And so now all of a sudden I'm flopping eggs in the kitchen and I'm all stoked about it. Well, yay me, yay Matt, yay everyone who is mindful and curious and passionate enough to set a shining example of how this is all done. And so I think that if we have served, our responsibility, if we still feel like we want to continue serving, is to demonstrate that through actions for the team that is all around us or just half a step behind us, where we're setting an example of maybe excellence in pursuing something that gets the brohi most stoked up about the vibe of cracking it out of the park, being jazzed about whether it's snowboarding or surfing, whatever it is that's your jam as a hobby. And then bam, maybe there's something that you're definitely into where you now want to be a mega photographer, and presto changeo, you've got a photo on the cover of Time magazine or whatever. Who knows? What you put into it is what you get out of it. But that is the solo journey. What you put into it is what everyone gets out of it. That is the team journey. And I think that for anyone out there who's looking to serve, if that's your jam, then start serving by doing better yourself for the team all around you.
Yeah. This is one of the things about the collective is like the vibe. The vibe here on the show is it's relaxed, it's insightful, it's thoughtful. It's all these things that we've been told over the year or over the span of this year, but it starts from coming from a place of openness, curiosity, of all these things that we've been espousing for this whole year, and it has been outstanding. It's been just an absolute great conversation. I'm just gonna hit on a couple of these comments, and then we'll probably have time for one more thought instigated. But let's hit these real quick. Whoops, back up here. So Steve jumped in here earlier. He said, learning to do 1 minute box breathing sessions 3 times a day can start a practice in traffic, in the gym, etc. Trigger that parasympathetic nervous system to feel the effect and effect. This is a great process. And not only, I think this goes back to what you guys were saying in terms of find something that can give you that space. So surfing, snowboarding, jiu-jitsu. For me, I love being on the mat specifically because it gives me that practice. He says some is better than none. Little wins, absolutely. Salty jumps in here. He said, I found that being deliberate in my acts, deep breath, focus, mindset, and go has helped. But I hadn't started changing my internal wording until I had been beasting myself for a few months. I found that after about 6 months, I started positive self-talk when setting short-term goals, when building on my long-term goals. That's a fantastic point as well. He carries on to answer Nick, the sun over farm fields at 0600 at 0600 corn pushing up through the snow, the orange and red in the sky, and no one else on the back roads for a moment. My morning drives, and every morning the sky is different, so I'll never see the same reason to be grateful daily. This is a fantastic example. Another great practice every day. There's gratitude practices, there's mindfulness practices, there's all these things that can kind of get us started. But I think the key, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, is I think the key is finding the mindfulness moments in things that you already either enjoy or can be grateful for. So you start with something that you know, and then you start expanding it from there. But what are your guys' thoughts on it? Matt, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
No, I don't know how to answer this one because it's those little things. It's like what Salty was saying. It's the little things that add up to be big things, right? Like I was never a good writer. I always said to myself, but then I started doing like small little verses, small little stories, that kind of thing. And now I'm writing a book, and I want to be done by New Year's, so I'm kind of like really crushing it out right now. But it's just taking that first step that's in finding what you actually enjoy and developing and growing with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be correct the first time. You can't be like, Time magazine number 100 best writer or whatever, right? It's literally a dude behind a keyboard who's actually putting some passion into what he enjoys, and he's growing and developing with practice and experience.
Absolutely. Catherine, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, pulling off of what Matt was saying is, finding the small things that matter to you, whether they're, your good, bad, or indifferent. I think it can be a slippery slope if you're chasing like success each day, or like today has to be better than the next. Because that's not always the case. That's not how life works. But finding what you're passionate about, sharing that with others in some sort of way, whether that's a conversation you have or posting about it or whatever it is. But finding people that matter to you, sharing the things that matter to you, are going to help things just blossom within your life, and you're going to have a support system through that. But yeah, it's finding those small things, living through them, and not feeling the guilt or the selfishness with that. Giving yourself a little bit of grace and time to lean into it and see where things go. Because typically, when you start to flourish, everything else around you and those around you are inspired by it as well. And it's a beautiful ripple effect.
Absolutely. Nick, any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I wanted to kind of hit on what Salty was saying a little bit about when you talked about positive self-talk. I think that's something that a lot of dudes don't learn how to do or ever get around to. I know, you know, at least with my own personal experience and some of the boys, like it's always self-deprecating. You know what I mean? It's like always like, oh, I'm an idiot. Oh, I'm a XYZ. Oh, I'm a insert thing X. Right. And it's always down talking. And it's like, even on missions, even when we do rad stuff, like, oh, you know, I'm still a big dummy. You know what I mean? Or like, you know, I'll say like, I'm too dumb to quit kind of thing. Where hardly ever do I see dudes from our community, and you know, the ones that I do see sometimes aren't great intent, poor execution. But it's like a lot of us don't lean into that. And I think that's a very important thing to do. And I think it's something a lot of guys or a lot of people need to be aware of. It's something like, hey, set your goals. And then like, it's something I started doing recently. And that's why I kind of hit so heavy was I started doing daily affirmations with my journaling. And, you know, I'd write down things I'm grateful for, and then, you know, my whole journaling practice would have you. But I would hardly ever tell myself like, hey, Nick, you're awesome. Hey, Nick, you're hardworking. Hey, Nick, you can do this. You're stronger than you think. And I think that's super important, not only just for setting goals, but just for everyone. Because a lot of times when I look back at my journaling to start doing my daily affirmations, I'm trying to give myself positive affirmations to things that I'm self-conscious for, insecure about, or something that's going on in my day. Like, hey, Nick, you see things through. Hey, Nick, you can work hard enough to get this done. Right. Like when I look at that daily affirmation, that block of time when I'm journaling, I'll see it's like, oh man, I was struggling with not getting things done, or I was struggling with not thinking I belong. And I just think that that's super important to do and to kind of like highlight within everybody, you know.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this?
I'm going to stick to what Nick just put down, and that is I'm kind of the same way. I kind of down talk everything that I do. I struggle to own anything that I put out there that is semi-decent. I couldn't even say good. I had to call it semi-decent because that's the imposter syndrome in me, which I've got like 11 out of 10. And so I find it difficult to lay claim to anything that I've done in my life as pretty rad. And so, but not too long ago, actually started this year, one of my good buddies challenged me to, dude, you got to stop saying that you suck at podcasting. Because in my head, I feel like I suck. And I never wanted to do it anyway. So, like, it's a double suck. And so, the reason that he challenged me to stop saying that is because other people were seeing that I was doing, I guess, semi decently. And then I'm saying I suck. And so what does that mean to them? Like now they really suck because I'm doing it better than them. And I was like, oh, dude, I never even thought of it that way. Like in a sense, I was like, I was saying that those other folks out there that are struggling truly in podcasting are like even worse than I am because I was saying that I was bad. But that's not what I was thinking. That's not what I was saying. I was just thinking about my not great delivery behind a microphone. And so I had to change my language. I had to stop saying, man, I suck at podcasting. That's generally what I think most of the time, but I don't verbalize it now. I try to keep a grip on it, bite down on my mouthpiece, do my best in front of a microphone in the moment, and I let it unfold. And so I have reduced my down talk to quite a degree. And through that practice of trying not to like screw it up for the team by saying that I suck, I suck, I suck, I've actually started to realize that I guess I don't suck as bad as I used to think I sucked. And so it is kind of an ironic sort of feedback loop where I'm trying to do it for the team, but it works well for me now that I realized, yeah, I guess I'm not that bad at it. And so I'll claim that I'm semi decent at it now because, again, imposter syndrome. And so I think it is important that we not only do it for ourselves, but if we're verbalizing it out loud, that we be cautious for the people who are around us, what they're hearing in that messaging and how it reflects on them or how it impacts their life, perhaps not positively. So I'd encourage everyone, based on what Nick just said, to get a grip on it for yourself, but get a grip on it for the team around you.
Yeah. I could not agree more. It's funny when you guys mentioned it, the first thing I wrote down was knuckle dragger. And I don't know how many times I've heard people use that term of, oh, I'm just a knuckle dragger. Right? You need to bring it down a little bit, or things like that. And, Marines that eat crayons and all these things. And I think what it stems from is that when we're in the military, it's like an imposed humility, right? You see other people just kicking ass left, right, and center. And they're like, yeah, I'm not that great at it. I still need work, which to everybody else is like, well, I got a long way to go then because like I'm not up to that guy, and that drives that humility. But once we get out of the military, especially, it can carry on into every other aspect of our life and just constantly beat ourselves down and tell us, oh well, man, I didn't get my PT in, I'm a piece of crap, and I'm blah, and you just start to lay into yourself negatively, which affects everything else as well. So I mean, that's a whole nother conversation that we've gotten into on another of a bunch of occasions. I mean, we've done, I think, 4 or 5 shows on imposter syndrome alone this year. So it's something that is close to Shaun and I's heart. I think we both suffer from it a lot. Now we are just a little bit over an hour now. I first off just want to say, Nick, Matt, Catherine, thank you guys so much. This has been a really impactful episode for myself, and I've been taking notes left, right, and center. So I really appreciate the conversation. Any final thoughts? Anything at all still bubbling in the back of your head? Matt, let's start with you. Work our way down. What do you think?
I believe mindfulness is something that everyone should practice, and it starts slow, start small, right? Be in the moment for the second. Trying to remove yourself from the stressors and stuff around you, because once you do, and you actually put a realistic value what those stressors are by being mindful in that moment where you are, it actually reduces everything down, and it's no longer a stress or a strain. It's just a moment, and you can push through and keep on going past that moment. And on the other side, you reassess and you keep on going, and it's a very, very valuable skill. And yeah, definitely start slow, but master it throughout your life.
Absolutely. Nick, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think with mindfulness, we've been talking a lot about the good and like the powerful of it, like all the good things that come around it. But I also think it's important to be mindful of things that make you not the person you want to be. For me, it was anger issues. When I was transitioning out of the military, when I got into psychedelic therapy, I had a mentor at the time who called it a righteous rage. And he's like, nothing feels better than a righteous rage, because when you're justified, you punch it in the face, you're like, he had this coming. But at the same time, like, that's not the right answer most of the time. That's not the right answer. But being mindful and noticing when that rage starts to fester up and what it feels like it very rarely does it just snap and you just start swinging on people. Generally, there's a triggering event, and then there's a few stages that escalate that. And being mindful of those things as well. I think that's really important. Is we talk about mindfulness and like stop, look, listen, smell, take, and eat, tactical pause, what have you, and enjoy the beauty of the moment around you. But also you have to do that for the things that aren't so beautiful. And I know for a lot of us, it's anger issues. So just practicing that mindfulness in all things you do, and you'll be surprised on how well, once you start realizing like, oh, this thing pisses me off a lot, and be like, okay, well, why? And then be mindful in that moment, take that second, be like, all right, we're not going to deal with this anymore. And then you can start avoiding these things and avoiding these triggers.
Absolutely. Catherine, final thoughts?
Yeah. Take these moments to, quote unquote, be selfish. Don't be afraid to focus on yourself and allow that time and space for growth. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, as cliche and over, stated as that typically is. But that's where growth happens. You are constantly inspiring those around you, whether you're aware of it or not. So take advantage of those moments, build yourself up, because you're in a position always to change your culture, to change your environment. And it can always be for the good, but it starts with you, and you got to focus on that and allow it to grow.
100%. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yeah, well, we mentioned vibe, and obviously Nick and I are vibing because about 1 second before he said what he just said, it popped into my head the exact same thing that he just said. And what I envisioned was this. It was a visualization that popped into my head before his first word. And it was a guy sitting in his basement in the dark, not watching anything, just sitting on a couch, doing nothing, like all up in his head, all up in the past, all up in the future, but not in the present. And so if you for that individual in that moment, if they can just pause for a second and then bam, ground themselves into the moment and realize that they're sitting in a dark basement and they're probably pretty unhappy. If you can like vibe into that moment as an individual who is in the basement, what you should realize is, wow, this is pretty freaking gloomy right now. This kind of sucks. I wonder if there's sunshine outside. Like, walk upstairs, walk out the front door, and stare at the big yellow disc in the sun. Get some vitamin D in the Mark 1 eyeball. Change your life. If you're in a dark basement, you're probably there because you're in the past or you're in the future. You're not in the present. If you're in the present, you'll probably want to go see some sunshine. If you can start building off of that, go out surf, go out climb, go out ride, go out do jujitsu, go out and do freaking bake a cake. It doesn't matter what is in your immediate future. Your immediate future is better than hanging out in a dark basement by yourself in your past or future thoughts. So get in the present, realize what you've got going, and then immediately think, how am I going to create a better vibe right now? The more that you start creating better vibes, the more that you start getting vibes into your existence, the more you can start seeking vibe with others. And then presto changeo, you're doing better.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. You guys have been hitting on everything that I want to talk. I had a bunch of questions listed initially, and then you guys just hit everything as I was going through it. So beautiful conversation. I really do thank you guys. This has been just awesome to be a part of, and I found myself being able to be present throughout this whole conversation. I've been feeling the feelings of my pen, and I've been able to feel the coolness of the air in the basement that I'm in, and seeing the lighting, and like I can be present in the moment. But I was when I got out of the military, I was actually 10 years ago last week, I was not able to do any of this. There was no way I would even consider trying to be calm and thoughtful and being able to feel the coolness of the air on my skin while having a conversation. That was not happening. And so it's taken a while. And it does take work, and it takes effort, and it takes drive, and it takes the ability to want better for what you had than yesterday, right? You want to be able to be better than yesterday. And that's all I can say is just continually seek that every day. And you can do it with us here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.